Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Carefulist the podcast. We are happy to welcome Dr. Ashley Blackington to the show. She is the founder of Dovetail. Hi, Ashley.
Hi, how are you?
I'm I'm here as
Doing
we are as humans and caregivers. Sometimes that's being here is as good as it gets.
right, present and accounted for.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. So let's just dive in and start with your caregiving story.
Yeah, I have it's sort of a little bit of a long one, maybe. I don't know. I think that my caregiving story really started professionally, and then I saw I saw sort of a tale of, I call it the tale of two grandmothers. So my background is in occupational therapy, and I worked in as an inpatient therapist for a very long time. Loved it. It was a great job. And during that time, I had two grandmothers who, one of my grandmothers had cancer, and she had six kids who were all very close, and they all lived, except for one, they all lived, in the same town. And then I had another grandmother who she had a lot of vision changes, so glaucoma and cataracts and macular degeneration, who had seven kids, was one of, they were both incredibly independent women, like
Mhm.
13 kids between the two of them, they were forces of nature.
Right.
But my grandmother with seven kids, she really struggled in asking for help.
Mm.
And so it was just a really interesting experience because and all the kids, all of these kids were all, lining up to help and say, how can I do this? But from my own perspective, my grandmother, um, who had cancer, she was like, tell me, I went into her house and she said, tell me what do we need to do to make sure that, I'm safe in the bathroom and the kitchen, and, was really welcoming of all of these strategies and teaching and those things. And she actually stayed in her home. She was able
Mhm.
to stay in her home. She passed away in her home. And she really was comfortable and lived a very functional life. And it was, everyone really rallied around. My other
Mhm.
grandmother really just could not, she was so independent, and she, her husband did not really help her raise seven children. She was married, but these and her kids are all really independent, and she was just had this like a massive fear about like being a burden and like asking
Yeah.
people for things. And she actually fell and broke her hip and went into
Ugh.
the hospital and never went home. And
Yep.
so, the two different origin, reasons for needing help and
Mhm.
caregiving and family caregiving are different, but the result is it was dramatically different. And so that was my exposure to really care and what that can look like from a personal perspective.
Right. Well, and first of all, thank you for sharing that. And secondly, it is such a good window into the concept of aging in place and how it can be done. But there has to be planning and there has to be conversations for it to go well and for it to work out the way that everybody would like it to.
And there
Um,
has to be an openness to
hmm,
having these conversations, to sort of addressing the awkward parts of it, because it is, you're talking about autonomy and dignity and the balance of parents getting older and requiring help and kids, you're navigating your own roles. It's
right.
a lot.
Yeah. It is very complicated and it is a hard conversation to have um, because of that role flip, right? Even if you have a very open relationship, it's still awkward to try to have that conversation where the person who used to be the one giving care is now receiving it and vice versa. Um, yeah. Do you
Yeah.
have any advice for how to have those conversations?
Yeah, so I after, after navigating or helping, people navigate that experience, I actually started I shifted down in time at the hospital because I had kids. I had young babies and it just the scheduling and all of that stuff, childcare, everything that you see on the news related to caregiving for younger people is that's it.
Yep.
And so what I did was I actually opened my own private practice, private consulting where I would be hired by, it was often the adult children who were saying, I want my parent to come and live with me, but I need to make sure that the house is set up. Or they would say, I know that like my mom or my dad they're getting older and they're having a little bit of trouble. So how can we set up the house because they want to stay in the house? And on a scale of, 100%, 80% of the work that I was doing was facilitating the conversation between adult children and their parents about future thinking and about planning ahead and about, it's the kids don't want to start the conversation. The adults don't want to have the conversation. And a lot of that is, again, related to fear, autonomy, and all of these really big pieces. Like we want to be independent human beings. Every human being wants to be an independent human being.
Yeah.
And so there is so much built up around this transition that I think a lot of times people and clinically in the hospital, I saw people that they waited so long to ask for help because they were afraid that if they asked for help with one thing, that would mean all of a sudden you don't have your car keys anymore and you can't go anywhere and like people are selling your stuff and you're gonna go to another like live in a facility. And I think that the more that we acknowledge that fear in the conversation, the less sharp it seems to be in the drop-in of it. And that's what I always found to be really helpful is to say, we're not talking about right now. It's not right now. If things go sideways, how is all of this going to change? We're saying eventually we all have to acknowledge no one is getting out of life alive. Um, so
Right.
we all have to acknowledge that at some point things won't work the same way that they do, and
Mhm.
to really be able to give the parents an opportunity or the older adult, the care recipient, an opportunity to say, this is what I'm comfortable accepting help with. This is what I'm not comfortable accepting help with. These are my wishes for how long I would like to remain in this house based on, function and finances and abilities and care and all of those pieces coming together. If I get to a point where I need help with this, this, and this, then I think that's too much and I'm open to a conversation then.
Mhm.
I think the longer the ramp on in the conversation, the softer the climb versus, I've
Yes.
seen I've seen people that they come into the hospital, they fell, they went to acute care, they had surgery, they see me in acute rehab and their adult kids are like, "Well, we have construction coming in because they're going to put in all these grab bars." And then that person is returning to a house that doesn't look anything like the house they left
Right.
because it's so emergent.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the big thing and one of the themes that emerges in all of these caregiving conversations that I'm having is the best thing you can do for yourself is to have these conversations when everybody's healthy, when nobody's fallen, when there's not a diagnosis, so that everybody is thinking calmly and clearly and rationally about what they want and what's realistic, and what might not be realistic. It's very difficult to have an open conversation if you don't lay all the cards on the table. So you have to be honest about the financial situation, right? You have to be honest about what the doctor has said in your most recent appointments.
Hmm.
If things aren't shared, then plans and decisions are made that aren't optimal for what you actually need. So that can be a challenge as well.
Yeah, and I think that's it, right? Like everyone has to get it out on the table, and that is where I think that's what brings a lot of, there is again like a lot of sharp edges into getting into these conversations. But what happens when you don't have them is that you get to that point where people are trying to make decisions with not every opinion in the space and frankly the opinion that matters the most, which is of the care recipient. So
Yes.
if you're making decisions in an emergency room or end of life or things like that where you've got one person saying I think that mom would really like to have this and the other person saying well that's not what I hear from her,
Hmm.
that not having these conversations before you get to that point, that's what sets up generational resentment, right? Like
Hmm.
that's when the fork really starts to divide. And
Yeah.
all that that could it's not and it's not simple, but having the conversation with the person to say, these are my wishes for hospital, these are my wishes for hospice, for, postmortem or whatever it is, get all of
Mhm.
that stuff out there and don't let it eat at you because the longer you keep it inside, the bigger it gets.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Um, so let's back up for a second because we talked about how you are a doctor of occupational therapy. Can you explain for people what occupational therapy is and how you help people?
Yeah. So, occupational therapy is really the foundation of it is the occupation of life and living life. So, I've had a million and one people say, I'm retired. I don't need an occupational therapist. And you're like, not an occupation as in a job. This is the occupation of life. So, we are trained in activity analysis, which is you have someone perform a task, you ask them about their experiences, and you're looking at things like the physical environment that they're doing it in, physically how they are doing,
Hmm.
trying to or performing these actions, how you can help modify either one, how you can bring in some teaching. So occupational therapy is I think of it as like the grout of the allied health professions. Like we get a little bit into the PT and we get a little bit into the speech and we get a little bit into, nursing. So roughly and very adjacently, but really we're about my goals when working with somebody are actually their goals. Everything is directed by the patient and the or the client that you have. It's, I'm not going to teach somebody how to do their laundry with a front-loading washing machine after they broke their hip if they've never done their laundry in their life. If that's not their job, like I'm not there to like polish up a checklist for somebody else. It's really about what are the things that you want to do? What are the things that you need to do? What are the things that make you you and make you feel like you? And how can you get back to doing that after whatever's happened, accident, illness, surgery, cancer, all of these things. So something has happened in your life that has changed the way that you interact with the world and other people. And OT comes in to say, here's how we can think about different ways to do this so that you are able to be successful in that activity.
Yeah. So one of the abbreviations you see a lot in caregiving is ADL, and that's activities of daily living or activities for daily life. Um, that sounds pretty self-explanatory. Are there like a core group of things that are included in that, just so when people see that they understand what that means?
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of the ADL stuff, you can think of it as the things that you do before you leave the house in the morning.
Mm.
So, bathing, dressing, grooming, um, eating, all of those things. Like if you think about you get up in the morning when I would go in and work with somebody to do like initial assessment for a new patient coming onto the unit, it was you've got to get up and get out of bed, get into the bathroom, go to the bathroom, wash your hands, brush your teeth, brush your hair, unless you're going down to have a shower or you're having a shower in the room,
Mhm.
depending on the hospital setup, how that process goes. Are you able to get in and out of the shower safely? Are you able to get yourself cleaned up, dried off? It's all of those pieces. So ADLs
Yeah,
is, you know, ADLs are the things that you have to do before you leave the house, and
right.
generally is
And for
kind
the
of a good
most
way
part,
to.
the stuff you take for granted and is kind of reflexive. for
Yes.
now until something disrupts it. And then suddenly you're going, oh, I've never had to, this happened to me after my first C-section was I've never had to think about how I lift my leg over the side of the tub to get into the shower and
Hmm.
how much it hurts when
I,
you've
yeah,
had abdominal surgery.
I will never understand why there are not occupational therapists on maternity units. It's
It
like,
would be really helpful.
yeah, I mean, I was an OT and I had, after my kids were born, like I thought like if I didn't know some of the things that I know and the tools and stuff like that, like wow, holy cow, like it would be a really great opportunity. I mean, wink, wink, nudge, nudge to someone out there that wants to do a rotation in like maternity. But it's true. It's all that stuff that's just automated that you don't even think about, and now you're like, oh, wait a minute,
Right.
this
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Right. Yeah. You go to do it and your body's like, nope.
Try again tomorrow, and you're like, no, it's going to the bathroom. Like I gotta go.
Yeah. This is not a thing that can wait.
Hmm.
Oh, fun. Not so fun. Um, what do you what do you wish the general population knew about occupational therapy? And maybe we've touched on it already, but if we haven't, what's something that they should know?
I think, if I had to drag out my OT soapbox, which I will happily do, is that there is a really, really, really core component of OT that focuses on prevention.
Mhm.
And the hardest part about that is that most people do not meet an occupational therapist, interact with an occupational therapist, hear the definition of occupational therapy until something has already gone wrong.
Right.
I cannot tell you how many times I had people when we were working together in the hospital, they're like, "Oh, this is just how I've done this for years." And you're like, "What about this? Like, what about this? How about if you tried doing this, whatever strategy, tying your shoes or something like that with decreased mobility?" And they're like, "Where have you been
Yeah.
all this time?" And you're like, "We're like gate kept
Yeah.
by insurance and all of those pieces." And that's part of the reason why I started a private practice because I thought, well, if we really want to get to prevention and we really want to be able to do client directed activities and focus on the client goals,
Mhm.
I got to get out of the hospital and actually get into the community to be able to meet people where they're at. And it was
Right.
really helpful.
Yeah. So how do people know they need you? When like what are some triggers or some catalysts or whatever you want to call it that would make people go, "Oh, I'm on this path and I should get some preventative help." Is there like your 60th birthday or when you start having trouble with something or what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I wish there was an age where it like became a screening tool, like
Yeah.
in if they let Allied Health rewrite the some of the regulations for reimbursement, I think you it would be a really we'd get to a much more preventative space. But I think
Mhm.
anytime like when you start to encounter difficulty with things, not necessarily like waiting until you're having trouble with ADLs, but things where the activity is not running as smoothly for you as it used to, like
Mhm.
paying your bills. If you've got it's hard now because a lot of people don't write checks anymore for their
Yeah.
bills, and they're talking about balancing checkbooks and stuff like that. Like when you got into those pieces, like some of the early cognitive pieces, that was a really um kind of a great way for people to say, "Oh, this I'm sort of having trouble keeping track of this or having trouble with that." So, I
Mhm.
think once you start to encounter difficulty in things that used to be really smooth,
Mhm.
stuff around the house, any sort of community mobility, one of the things that we used to do was to take people out into the community and have them like go shopping. Um, I think that there's always a really big opportunity to have OT come into the mix there and say, how can we think about adjusting this activity so
Mhm.
that you're going to be more successful?
Yeah. And that's a key thing. You just made me think of when my mom was early on in her dementia journey, she could operate just fine at home because they had lived there forever. They had had the same appliances for a really long time. So a lot of that was muscle memory.
Hmm.
And it was when you took her out of that familiar environment that it became very clear very quickly how far she had progressed. And that if she wasn't in that environment where it was the muscle memory situation, there were a lot of things that she couldn't do.
And I think that is incredibly common. Like, we have
Yeah.
people like when they come into the hospital, they've been away from their home for a couple days. They are, something like they have pain, they have, maybe medication, nutrition has changed. They're actually drinking water. They're
Mhm.
actually eating 3 meals because they're not forgetting to eat lunch, or they don't drink water because I did not know this before I started working. There was generations ago, it was like you ate all of your food and then you drank water after. Like there was no like alternating during a meal.
Yeah. Yes.
I was like 20 something years old going, there is water there. And they're like, you can't drink the water until you finish the meal. What? Like, okay. And so then you're working on an education piece around like, how about if we alternate some sips because then the swallowing is you're gonna not choke.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, having people outside of their regular environment, and I think
Mhm.
that's why when people know, so older adults or people that have early dementia or things like that, they know, but they're so afraid that their world gets smaller and smaller. So I think if you're
Yes.
an adult, if you are an adult child of somebody where you're like, they don't really want to go and do these things that they wanted to do, and they are having trouble, like if you live close by and they come over for a little bit, but they're like, I'm really tired and I'm ready to go home and things like that. When you start to notice those changes, I think that's always a great time to be like, let's talk about how things are going. And that's the
Yeah.
other part is you don't want to confront someone and say like, I think that you have this going on. It's like, can you tell me about,
Hmm.
I've noticed that you're spending a lot of time at home and you're not going out to do these things that you used to, and see what the response is to that.
Right. Yeah. Open-ended questions are the most helpful. You don't
Hmm.
want to box yourself into yes and no questions. And certainly the accusatory tone or the interrogation approach is going to shut down any information you're going to get. So asking those open-ended questions or, things like, I've noticed, how do you feel about, what do you think? And we've mentioned before in other episodes, if you need to use an excuse of something happened to someone down the street or a friend of yours and you make up a scenario that, you know, they're not going to be able to double check just
Hmm.
to get that conversation going. Um, More often than not, people are relieved that the question has been asked and the conversation has been started and they didn't have to be the one to start it.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, they're like two people circling the same problem, waiting
Yeah,
for someone to jump in, waiting for someone to make that move. And the fear around a loss of autonomy is
yeah,
paramount to anything else. Like people that need a lot of help will still wait and wait and wait and wait because it is like I don't want everything taken away from me. I worked my whole life to have the things that I have.
yeah. You said something earlier that I thought was key, and I want to make sure it didn't get lost. You were talking about um, when you're having a conversation with someone about what they want and how they want their life to be and be able to stay in their home and things like that. You said, at what point are you okay with making a change in where you live? Um, what are some of the things that people need to take into consideration when they're having that piece of the conversation?
I think that one thing that people really need to consider is now, I don't know if this has been talked about in other episodes, is that in Medicare, there's a 5-year look back.
Mm,
This is something that, this is another reason why I think the conversation around aging, the sooner we started, the better off we're going to be.
yeah.
So if you are trying to qualify for Medicare so that it will cover anything, they look at your assets. Your assets are the money that you have in the bank, property that you own, things like that. And I have seen people where it's 2 years ago, they signed over the deed of their house to their kids because this is their thing, right? This is the thing that they've worked their whole life for and they have
Yep.
paid it off and all of that. And they are going to give it to their children, and that's what will go on.
Hmm.
Medicare does a 5-year look back, and you will not qualify if you have in that 5-year window, if you have sort of dispersed assets, because they want your assets to pay for as much of this care as possible.
Hmm.
That is why, really, number one, far and above, the longer runway you give yourself, the better off, because so much of the conversation around finances and financing care for aging adults or people that need continued and a lot of support, like in a dementia unit or something like that,
Yeah.
is that these are not cheap. I mean, there's a skilled nursing facility up the road from me. It's $10,000 a month for 24-hour dementia care.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about, you have a house that you bought 30 years ago or 50 years ago, and you want to sign it over to your kids, Medicare wants you to sell that house, and they want the
Hmm.
money out of that because it's 10 grand a month to that
Right.
facility. So that's a big part of it, is making sure that there is a financial plan in place for how that's going to be.
Hmm.
Second, I think unless you have something that, if you're talking about like a general aging where there isn't a memory element to it, that's a conversation around like I don't think anyone who is looking down that road wants to go and like tour these places. But maybe they do. Maybe they want to know about activities. Maybe you want to have an option to be at a place that there's a lot of facilities now that are not necessarily like they have a independent living unit all the way through to like a memory care. And
Hmm.
so maybe people say, okay, when I get to a point where, you know, getting the groceries and it's not usually groceries, it's usually like cleaning and being able to maneuver around the house and do some more of the heavy lifting. If you're having somebody come in and do that stuff, you might be able to bridge for a little while. But if it's really becoming this drain of like, we've got someone in here cleaning and we've got someone in here dropping off meals and we've got all of these things lined up, if that's too many things, at what point is the simpler answer to be in a place where you don't have to really deal with all of that day in and day
Right.
out? So
Yeah.
I think that's the piece, is that at what point does it make sense to you, the care recipient, to not have like 6 different people come in your house during the week to make sure that things are going? Because some people, they say, yeah, hire them all out. I'm staying in this house no matter what. Hire
Yeah.
them all. And then that gives your family the direction to say, okay, no matter what, if we got to get someone in here to do, 1 through 17, we're going to get somebody in here to do 1 through 17. We are not going down that road. And that
Mm.
helps them come up with a plan.
Right. And the other thing to keep in mind about places that offer um, the pathway is what I'm going to call it. So if they have one of the facilities that we used for my great aunt, they started out with like a cottage, sort of condo, independent living section on their property where you could still have your car. You had a garage, you had a little patio where you could have a grill and all of that, but you were on their property. So you didn't need to do snow removal or lawn care or anything like that. And if something happened, you were already there to be able to move to whether you needed assisted living or memory care or their rehab nursing area, whatever the case was. And one of the things that we heard them say the most often was that they wished people got there sooner and could live in that independent living piece, because when they did that, their quality of life was better for longer
Hmm.
because they had that community. A lot of folks are isolated in their house. So they're comfortable with their house and their surroundings, but if they're not comfortable going outside, if they're not comfortable driving or whatever, you automatically then have a community of other folks right near you, next door, who are in that same stage of life. And they have card games and they go for walks and they do all kinds of things together. Um, so if you take nothing out of this conversation, other than have the conversation early and do things sooner than you think you need to.
Hmm.
Please take that out of this.
Yeah, I mean, do it when there's no stakes.
Yeah.
I mean that's like you said, when it isn't heightened emotions, when it isn't, people are dealing with their own interaction with this massive change that's happening. Do it when on a Sunday, on a sunny day, when everyone is like calm and relaxed, and that's gonna help facilitate a lot of it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive into Dovetail and what your company is, what you're doing. And you've had a long runway of a career that's led you to this point. So I would love to hear what you're up to now.
Yeah, so all of these things, all of these stepping stones along the path, my personal interaction with caregiving and the clinical piece, the private practice piece, my experience as a parent, and all of those pieces lead into the fact that one of the biggest problems that I have seen throughout all of these different settings is the management of logistics around care. It
Yes.
is a terrible, I mean, we're not that far off from like pen and paper stick figures. And I know like a lot of people still do that. A lot of people, I've had people come in, they come in with the binder of everything's printed and they're like, this is my parents' information. Um,
Hmm.
and people do text messages, group chats, emails, phone calls. People are trying to communicate with each other. They're trying to collaborate. They are trying to do what they can with the technology that's available.
Hmm.
And so for years and years in the hospital, I saw this happen, right? People are coming in to bring home their parent or their loved one. They often had a kid with them, like a teenager or a toddler or
Yeah.
whatever, because they're navigating care for them and they're also navigating care for this aging individual,
Hmm.
and trying to, I don't know, put yourself in the mix too. Like that's kind of an essential. You've got to like feed and water yourself too. Like we're all plants.
Right.
Um, and so for years and years, I thought, why doesn't somebody create this technology where it just puts everything in one place so that I'm not one of six people that's going to meet with this person at the end of their
Mhm.
loved one's stay and give them information and all of these pieces and then send them off to the next therapist or doctor or nurse, whoever it is. I mean, you see
Mhm.
six people before you can leave the hospital.
Yes.
So it's really Dovetail is a care logistics management platform, and it is specifically designed for family caregivers. And you can integrate if you have paid care coming in or you have people that are helping to supplement, but it gives caregivers an opportunity to create their own care network.
Mhm.
Um, it's a really granular focus on who can help with what. So there's a lot of control that you have over who has access to what information because we're talking about
Mhm.
care,
Yeah.
and we're talking about health information, and we're talking about someone's, whatever preferences, whatever it is. Again, trying to honor this privacy and dignity piece throughout. And so I'm very excited. I think when this launches, when this interview goes live, it will hopefully be live. It is coming out at some point in March. I do not have the final date yet to be able to share. I wish I did. But it's nearing the finish line of development. I got the slides, the pictures of the screens from my developer yesterday. So very big,
Exciting.
exciting moment. Yes.
So in the meantime, where can people go to get information or to find it when it is out?
Yeah, so dovetaildesigns.co is the website. There's all the information up there on the app, and you can sign up for the wait list so you'll get access as soon as it comes online.
Nice.
There's also stuff there about paper-based. So Dovetail started as a paper-based
Hmm.
company, and then we just recently, in the last year and a half, transitioned to a digital platform. So if you are someone who really wants that paper-based feel to it to set up a home management strategy, if you have people that are really local and they want to have it be in writing, you want to have, if you have people coming into the house, that they would prefer to have it all on paper. um, there is home management tools and products available for sale now on the website, so there's both.
Oh, that's fantastic. You said
Yeah.
something that really resonated with me, which was when you're about to leave the hospital and six different people come in and give you instructions. And especially if you are the care recipient, you're like, I'm sorry, everything hurts.
Hmm.
I can't process all of these things. So the person next to you, whether they thought they were going to be a caregiver or not, is sort of de facto
Hmm.
caregiver who is now receiving all of this information. So for them to be able to have access to a system or to an app, um, I know will be extremely helpful and people will use it for sure. I wish I had it when I had my kids for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's this idea of like, we really want to have 78% of older adults in this country rely on friends and family only for all of their caregiving needs. The cost of care, the cost of care related to aging is skyrocketing. The
Mhm.
availability of care for older individuals is also becoming increasingly difficult because people just are not going into these fields in the way that they used to. And so
Yeah,
it's all circled back to family caregivers, because family caregivers love and care about that person, and they're not gonna, I mean, this is a glass ball. Like when you talk about rubber balls versus glass balls when you're juggling things, this is a glass ball and people are always going to do that, but they do that, caregivers do that at their own physical, mental, financial, emotional expense. And so my hope is that a caregiver that is sort of at the wit's end. I mean, really my hope is before it gets to that point, but that
yeah,
somebody who is feeling like everything is on fire right now and everything is the most important thing. It's like when you walk into your house and you've got an armful of stuff and you're like, I don't even know what to do first because I have to hold all of this stuff.
right.
That
Yeah,
I
whatever I put down first, it's going to make everything fall.
Yes, exactly. And so the intention of this product is to be that like table where you put everything down, where you can say, okay,
Yeah.
I can deal with this right now. I need to give this to this person. I need to pass this on. And the other thing that I will preach from the rooftops until the end of time is that it's a fully democratized platform. So there is no default for it. Because a lot of times what happens in caregiving is somebody ends up being the default and somebody ends up being the
Yes.
person that assigns a task or does whatever. This is a way for that caregiver, especially that default caregiver, to have a place to put all of it. So when people
Hmm.
say to you, just let me know what I can do to help, you're like, okay, this is the note of things that need to get done to help mom. I'm going
Hmm.
to share it with you. It updates in real time. So if they actually check stuff off on there and they've gone through and done stuff, you don't have to chase down the messages and the emails and the all of that stuff. So it's really giving the caregiver, the traditional default caregiver, a way to say, you guys all asked how you could help. Here's how you
Hmm.
can help. And having an accountability factor for people that are wanting to get
Yeah.
involved. Because I think people do want to help, they just don't necessarily always know how. And so it's like, well, just let me know. And you're like, I got so many
Yes.
things going on. So,
Right. Well, and it's also true for the person who ends up being the default caregiver. They typically, not always, are the kind of person who also doesn't know how to delegate. It
Hmm.
just seems to work out that way, right? So, like, they want help, they need help, but it's very difficult to say what they need you to do. So to have it there and just have that list and say, these are the things that need to get done. Somebody please handle something.
Hmm.
And people can pick and choose, but that accountability piece is key because it takes away those conversations of, you never told me, I didn't know, blah, 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 blah.
I didn't
It's
get the
all
email.
there. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's all there. So it makes some of those conversations a little easier as well because it removes some of it makes it a little bit more black and white is what I'm trying to say. It removes the gray.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think too, like, if you've got someone that is really like has trouble delegating, they become the black hole for everyone else energy
Yes.
wise. And that
Yes.
is a human. At the end of that, that is a human, and that human is not meant to carry all of these things. And then when you're thinking
Hmm.
about like that, if that human is the human is likely a woman,
Hmm.
um, the human is likely the oldest daughter, if in that situation. I mean, it's not a blanket statement, but a lot of times that's where it falls.
Hmm.
That and they have if they have children of their own, the health, there's a lot of research that's come out around the health of caregivers,
Yeah.
caregivers putting off appointments for themselves to manage their own health, screening appointments, um,
Hmm.
their own care, not I'm not a proponent of the like self-care bubble bath. I'm a proponent of the self-care as in like delegate these tasks out,
Hmm.
effectively be able to like remove things off your plate. But caregiver health is directly impacted by this unsupported caregiving and doing it for a long term.
Right. And the other piece of it, um, that I personally experienced, and I'm sure other people do as well, is when you're the caregiver, you also find yourself comforting other people and making them feel better about the situation. And that is exhausting.
Yeah.
Don't take that to the caregiver.
No,
Find
and I
somewhere else
yeah,
to
I
process that.
just I get that that's, people, I think, and that's a hard part too. Like people want to, they're like, I care so much. So
Mhm.
if I could just stop in here like a gas station and fill up on the information I need and all of these pieces, then I'm gonna feel better. And you're like, well, the
Mhm.
gas pours out of somewhere.
Right.
And like the tank is empty. We're scraping the bottom of the barrel, but not
Yeah.
with a metal thing because it'll explode. But, right, like I cannot go in all these directions. And that's like, I had a conversation with a woman last week who her mom has all these friends and they really want
Mhm.
to care, they really want to like check in and hear about what what her mom's doing and all this stuff. And she's like, the amount of energy that it takes for me to update these people,
Yeah.
it's like you can have a whole like there's a note and you share, like you ask your mom, is it okay if I share it with these people? Or your mom can share it with these people because what I really want in alignment with everything else that I've done is the care recipient to be an active member of the care team. I think
Yes.
that is a really important part that is missing in a lot of products that are currently on the market is that
Mhm.
the care recipient becomes the project that needs to be managed, and we lose that human element of it. And we're really doing, we end up doing what is their greatest fear, right? Is we take them out of the equation. Then it
Right.
becomes an ADL conversation, an IADL conversation, medication, not medication management, hospitals, all of that stuff. But
Mhm.
if we keep that person front and center in this conversation and in this network of family caregivers, they can say, "Oh, I never really liked that lady. I don't want her coming over to my house."
Mhm.
Fine, that's great. Then you're really, then I feel like as a caregiver, you're really acting from a place of feeling empowered. Like, I don't want to update this lady. My mom doesn't like to update this lady. Guess what? I don't have to update this lady.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a big piece is you are not obligated. It's probably a
Yes.
full sentence right there. You are not obligated. Um, but to elaborate on that, you don't owe people much, really. They can be as involved as they want to be, barring what the care recipient says. So if the care
Exactly.
recipient doesn't want them involved, honestly, that's one less thing that you, as their caregiver, has to participate with and think about.
hmm I mean, it's so much of it has to do with like the age that we live in now, right? Like people put everything and anything on social media.
Mhm.
But we're and it, that's because that's what attracts the attention of people. And you have to think about like, why are we attracting this attention? Are we attracting this attention from people that genuinely care about this person, or is this just somebody that wants to know someone else's business? And I
Right.
and I think that once you get to that point, once a care recipient is like, this is real, like this is my life, this is my privacy, this is my health, and this is stuff that I don't want shared everywhere.
Mhm.
Let's put some boundaries around who gets to know what about me.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So share with us the website one more time for
Yeah.
Dovetail.
Yeah, it's dovetaildesigns.co. I'm on Instagram. I am on LinkedIn. I am most active personally on LinkedIn. So I can send you the links for that. But yes, we're releasing in March. Um,
Perfect.
so excited.
And when it goes live, you will also be able to find it on carefulist.com as well.
Yay.
Well, thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to share or you want the audience to know about Dovetail, about OT, life in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing that I want, like, given the fact that a lot of the people that listen to your show are caregivers and they're
Mhm.
navigating this, is like there is so much, um, there's so many amazing people out there that are trying to do their best, and I just think that not often enough people stop and say, you know what, thank you for doing what you're doing. Like the people that are caregivers and the people that are family caregivers, they're doing this from a place of love and they're doing this from a place of genuine care. And whether it is, a parent or a child or whatever, I just think that the more that we can, I finished my newsletter with "You're doing a great friggin' job" at the end of it, because I just think that more people need to hear
Yes.
how amazing this work is and how invisible this work is, and to be acknowledged for the fact that like you doing what you're doing is making the difference in somebody else's life in a way that they can never pay you back for. And
Mhm.
it's incredible. And I'm amazed by family caregiving and the depths of love and compassion that people have for family members. So it's a thank you to everybody, because the world doesn't work. The economy doesn't work without care.
Right.
So
Full stop.
yes, mic drop.
Well, thank you for saying that. And it is absolutely true. Caregivers give of themselves so much. It's right in, the words we use to describe what they do. And they don't get thanked enough. So thank
Mhm.
you for ending our conversation on such a wonderful note. And with that, um, please remember to check out dovetaildesigns.co, and you can find that on our website. And until next time, take care.